Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you. I did think I was going to win the session with the snappiest title, but I saw that there were some others, actually. I'm actually going to just move the crosshairs slightly of what I was going to talk about, because we've already talked a bit about due diligence. So I thought I'd tell you a bit about Mazars and how our involvement became quite relevant to the Modern Slavery Act. 4 years ago, we were talking to several large companies in London, and we were talking to them about the guiding principles, which were unanimously endorsed in 2011. And there was a common theme that was coming back to us, which was, yeah, we understand the guiding principles. They're really easy to understand. Haven't got a clue how to apply them. And so we fed that back. We thought, well, we're not shy. We actually called up John Ruggie, who was the main author of the guiding principles, and said, John, this is what we've heard. And he was quite interested in our conversation, so he put us in touch with the team that actually wrote the guiding principles. And we came to the conclusion that what companies were really looking for was guidance on how to report on their human rights performance, how to report on their human rights behavior. Not that reporting was whilst reporting was the end goal, actually, we thought reporting will drive the change in behavior. So if companies actually knew what to report, then that actually drives the right behaviors within. And so we spent, as a firm, we've spent the last 4 years working with that UN team who are in an NGO called Shift, working on producing what's now known as the UNGP reporting framework. And the reason why that's relevant for slavery is because in the UK government guidance to the Modern Slavery Act, it recommends the use of the reporting framework to not only report in line with the Modern Slavery Act, but wider human rights. And so I thought I would just take you through some of the key concepts behind the reporting framework. Firstly, I should say, I'm not a lawyer. Mazars is a firm of accountants. We're a great big firm of accountants with 17,000 people all over the world. So what's the interest for Mazars in doing this? Well, we've got lots of auditors and lots of management consultants who are very good at helping implement processes and process change within companies. And as part of the development of the reporting framework, we spoke to over 200 organizations, governments, regulators, companies, professional firms, and a lot of civil society. Civil society were very keen to engage with us, which was fantastic, because actually they're the people who really told us what was going on the ground. And so we came up with this reporting framework, which has 3 objectives. The first objective was that it now gives companies consistent and coherent guidance on what to report. It may be in their annual reports, it may be in their integrated reports or sustainability reports, or whatever they want. It just gives guidance on how to report. The second objective was that it has to be feasible for companies to apply. One of the big pieces of feedback we received during the consultation period was, whatever you do, don't come up with anything that's actually going to require us to go and find out a whole load more data. And so we didn't. Actually, most companies have this information. They just hadn't got the synapse connected on how to get that information into a report. And the third objective was to actually improve businesses' internal management systems around human rights. And we split the reporting framework into 3 sections. Actually, if you look at the reporting framework, if you go to ungpreporting.org, you'll find it's only 2 pages long. And some wag said, well, you spent 2 years coming up with 2 pages. It's like, well, it's some small writing. And there is actually a lot more guidance behind it. But what they're a series of questions. They are 8 overarching questions and 23 supporting questions. And it's all very logical. It starts in the section A with what does the company publicly say about its commitment to respect human rights? How did it come up with that commitment? Who did it engage with? How has it embedded it within the company? There are a lot of hows. They're very simple questions, these, but there are a lot of hows. And that goes to a lot of what people have been saying today. It's very easy to write a policy. It's not so easy to tell people how you've actually applied it and how effective it is, because that is where we're going with this. Part B is the filter point. One of the issues was we didn't want companies reporting on every single human right. Well, we know human rights, are inalienable, indivisible, and interrelated. But we had to provide a pragmatic filter point for reporting. And so we came up with a concept of salience. And salience is when you don't look at risk to the business, you look at risk to people. And what you're looking at is those human rights which are most at risk of a severe negative impact. And the key here is severe. And what we kind of defined severe as looking at scale, scope, and remediability, or irremediability, actually. The scale is, well, how serious is that human rights impact? Is it death, and is it more systemic, or was it a one-off violation somewhere? With scope is, well, how many people did it impact? And irremediability is, well, can you return that person to their previous enjoyment? And so the way that we've suggested companies go about this, because companies they're still struggling in some way, because this respect for human rights, and in particular slavery, it looks like you have to tackle eating an elephant. And what we say is, look, you just have to do it one bite at a time. And that very much means looking at your key risk, for slavery, I would say your key risk industries and your key risk jurisdictions. Start in your supply chain there. And then a lot of companies, they seem to be hung up with audits of their first tier suppliers. There's a lot of self-assessment going around in the first tier. What we're suggesting is maybe the actual human rights impacts, they generally don't happen in that first tier. They happen, and we just had the question about raw materials, they happen a lot lower down. Now, that's not where it only happened, but that's not a bad place to start. So what we say is, as part of this due diligence process that Cindy referred to, why don't we continually engage, work with our peers maybe, work with NGOs on the ground to actually work out where the main issues are. What processes have we got in place to tackle fourth tier down in the supply chain? Because if we address those issues, and this is the complex area, then more than likely you're actually going to be able to address the wider slavery and human rights issues. And part C of the framework, just to finish this bit off, is, well, for each of those salient issues, and we think there should only be 3 or 4, Unilever went and found 8, Nestle came out with 11, but they're some of the biggest companies in the world. I think most normal sized companies will have 3, 4, or 5 salient issues. Just tell us about the policy that you have, who you engaged with, how you integrated that policy into your processes, how you've acted and tracked. Now, the tracking of it is a new area as well, the assurance of human rights. And we just recently released a consultation draft for companies and external assessors and external assurance providers to be able to provide assurance services on human rights. And it's primarily aimed at the internal auditors in companies, because they need to monitor the effectiveness of human rights. And there hasn't been any other guidance out there so far. And then, of course, the final bit of the reporting framework is, well, where you've had to remedy, tell us about how you have provided that remedy. So the fundamental ethos behind the guiding principles was know and show. Understand the impacts and your key risks, and tell people. Tell people what you're doing. If you've engaged with the right people, it's almost like the reporting should write itself. And we're working with a large company at the moment, and just to say, this is a really complex area. While you've got the center of the company, the CEO and the main head office in Western Europe saying, this is what we must do. Then when you go out to the global south and say, this is what you must do, they go, no, we're not. Otherwise, we'll go out of business. It's not competitive. These are the pressures that you've got. You've got the head office going, these are our values. this is how we view human rights. But then you've got people lower down going, yeah, but we have a different concept of human rights. This is what you've got to tackle on the ground, and it's not so easy. So that's what we say. This is a journey. And when you talk to some of the big companies, just to finish on a metaphor, some of the big companies who we think have already got this, they say their train is only just pulling out of the station. I think a lot of companies, thanks to the Modern Slavery Act, at least they're at the station. A lot of them are looking at the train thinking, how do I do this? If it wasn't for the Modern Slavery Act, I don't think that many companies would actually know where that station is. So I will just finish on that. Thank you very much.